Hello, everybody. It's Dina at the Real Lives Foundation, and I have another special guest for you today. Her name is Rachel, and I can't wait for you to hear her story. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Rachel, and then I'll let you take it away.
Sure, thanks. I am happy to be here with you and with all of your listeners and to be able to share some hope with you all today. That is my goal through my story of coming to an incredibly hopeless place and then my life becoming about boldly sharing hope. Um,
Mm.
so I married, I would say, my high school sweetheart. We met in youth group, actually. I was married at 19 to an incredible young man, and we both had a real focus on our future and wanting to be wise and wanting to follow the Lord. And I consider myself very fortunate to have found such an amazing person when we were both still babies, really, I feel like now, looking back. We were married at 19, and we started raising my nieces and nephew together as well. So we poured into them, and then they came to live with us. And as they were born, until I had a niece, a nephew, and another niece that came to me very, very new. I remember that first night. We literally didn't even have a crib, a bed, a pack and play. She slept in a stroller by our bed. And so life was very full. From a very young age, we had to grow up really fast into learning what it was to be married and working through things and having children. And we moved through seasons of life pretty quickly. I studied biomedical sciences and went to nursing school. And my husband got his undergrad PhD, master's and PhD in civil engineering. And we added a biological daughter into the mix. So by the time before we were 30, we had these 4 children and a very full life. He was finishing his PhD at that time to start his own business. And I was still working as a nurse. I was homeschooling mom, and we were involved in our church. Our faith was and continues to be extremely important to me and my love for Jesus. And we were serving in the church. I led worship, and he did hospitality things. We were involved with international student ministry and serving and welcoming them here. We had them living in our home with us. Life was full. It was full of blessings. However, it also was extremely stressful, and that may have been why an addiction that my husband had resurfaced. We had worked through this previously. It's been a lot of work. Our marriage actually almost ended a year and a half to 2 years in related to this. But he had received a lot of help and had had years and years of sobriety. And for whatever reason, at this time in our life later, that resurfaced. Not only resurfaced, but began to escalate out of control. And it was an extremely challenging last year there from 2018 into 2019, because my incredible husband, who loved God and loved people and was so teachable and humble and wise, began to be someone else behind closed doors. Only a few people really saw the depth of that, but instead of needing and wanting and being willing to get help with the addiction, he became very defensive of it and extremely angry at me as I was coming to a point of growing to have a voice and to have my own boundaries. I started individual counseling. I was part of groups that were for spouses of people struggling with this addiction, and I was really pouring into my own healing and trying to learn and grow. And it was an extremely difficult and crazy making time, almost like that picture of the frog that boils in hot water on the stove. You know, if you threw a frog in a pot of boiling water, it would jump out and know immediately there was a big problem. But if you put it in lukewarm water and you turn that heat on, and over time you could boil it without it ever jumping out and realizing it. And life became more and more crazy. It was like that. And as I look back, I was like, how was I still in this? And how did we make it? And the kind of wild things that were going on. He even became abusive in different forms, was extremely angry at me for my boundaries. And both he and the leadership at the church I was involved in, there was spiritual abuse, as they were telling me to submit. I had needed to submit in using scripture when there was definable abuse going on, that my cries were not heard and there was no referrals out. I was seeking help from the outside. I was asking him to do marriage counseling with me, which near the end he did for a short time, but was extremely angry again during that time. And even though things were wild, I just never in a million years thought what would happen would ever happen. And in 2019, we lost my husband by suicide. And I was left as a widow with 4 children, my nieces and nephew, who were ours with me. And our biological one was just 1 year old, our daughter. And then we went into the COVID pandemic in 2020, and the whole world turned into their own self and their own house and their own toilet paper. And, it was all the kids came home from school to be with me all the time, trying to navigate grief. It was really an unbelievable, tragic time. I still received blame related to his suicide, as he was very angry with me at the time. I was pulled from leading worship at church, never allowed to return, and my character was questioned, being the reason for that, and other things, because I was quote unquote not submissive and not showing godly character as a woman. And it was devastating. It was disorienting and devastating. And I became so low in that time that I actually became hopeless and suicidal and attempted twice myself. And so I have the unique perspective of both being a suicide loss survivor as well as a suicide attempt survivor. And through a lot of deep healing and pressing into the Lord, as I was being forced to do before, to have confidence that the Holy Spirit could lead and guide me to head my home, to lead my children, to lead my life, to find a safe church and make these decisions and move homes, and ultimately to grieve with hope and to heal deeply and to rebuild a life that I genuinely love again. He has been so faithful, and through all of this, he led me to leave 14 years as a registered nurse to start my own business, Hope Speaker. And what I am privileged, although I would never have imagined it or dreamed it up on my own, I'm doing what I would want to do more than anything else, which is to help widows. I am a coach for Christian widows, and I also have a Christian widow community membership that is private, virtual, where I can pour resources into these ladies to help them do the same thing that I did, to grieve with hope, not to get stuck in despair and hopelessness and just resigning to live until we pass away to be with them, but to really bring healing in a holistic way, in all of the areas, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, to be able to create a life that we actually love again. And I also am a suicide prevention advocate, so I'm able to do coaching and to be a speaker and to have been published as an author, and the work continues, but my passion is about supporting my Christian widow sisters and to save lives. And I am so thankful the messages I receive that I have saved lives. And, none of the things I get to do make it worth it, quote unquote, worth it. Like it was worth losing my husband to be able to save lives or do what I do. But even though it can't be placed on a scale of value, I know that those things are not the end of my story. And they're not the end of other people's story either, because my life, I've experienced great tragedies, but my life isn't a tragedy, and neither are other people's that I have the privilege to come alongside and work with and help them rebuild in a hope-filled way. So that's who I am and what I do.
Thank you for sharing that story. I can't even imagine being 19 and newly married and have 3 kids that aren't mine.
And the kids came along as we went. So let's see, my oldest niece was born when I was 18, and I was helping with her at that time. And my husband just, he loved children. He loved those kids like I did, like they were our own. And then my nephew came along a couple years after we were married. And then a few years after that was when my youngest niece came along and came right to us. So they're staggered in between them. But yeah, we moved through everything pretty quickly. And I think I'm just so thankful that we both at a young age, not that we have done everything or anything perfect by any means, but really had a good head on our shoulders that even, as we graduated high school, we went on a mission trip to Guatemala together before we started at university, and had such a heart for the gospel and to serve tangible needs of people and to really live our lives in a way that mattered. Like, we didn't want to waste this life, and we had an eternal perspective and a heart to really, and a real personal relationship with Jesus that really, it's not super common. And not that there's shame in that not being the case, but there's not always a lot of young people that really have that early on. I believe, and I tell my children, we can learn through wisdom, or we can learn through pain. And while there are things about life that failure is just part of the process here on earth, we can save ourselves from a lot of pain by following wisdom. And I'm grateful to the Lord for his Holy Spirit and leading and guiding us. And like I shared, we messed a lot of things up. And when I said we had a lot of growing up to do quickly, there was a lot of pain and error through that process. So it wasn't all like easy by any means, but we both wanted to grow and to do things well and right and to keep going.
Well, I think they're all lucky to have you.
I'm blessed to have them. My hands are full. Sometimes in the grocery stores, and I was young too, I would get some looks, and people would say some things I didn't realize. My oldest niece, who, I was 18 when she was born, when I would have the kids and the looks and the comments, that people would think they were my biological children, which even if they were, I don't know why you would say that to people, but the comments people make, and one that's not so rude, but they would say, "Oh, you got your hands full. You got your hands. Oh, your hands are full." And I reframed it, and I would say, "Yeah, hands full of blessings, because they truly are. Like, it hasn't been easy, but I'm so thankful for each one of them." And I've been remarried. So I lost my late husband 6.5 years ago. I have been remarried for 2. And my husband came to Colorado from Kansas City, Missouri area with my stepdaughter. And so there's 5 kids now between us. And all 5 of them, it's busy, hands full of blessings. There's a lot. We call ourselves a super blend, because dating, that's another way I support widows, is in the whole dating and remarriage and blending thing. There are ways that we want to approach all of those things from a healed rather than a wounded place, and to have support and guidance, and to care for our kids' hearts as we navigate that, because it's loss that brings people together and blending, whether that was death or divorce, or like in my now husband's case, who was never married. There's losses that bring blended families together, and we've got a whole bunch of dynamics. We were already kind of blending before, and now we're like the super blend, which is more like a crock pot than a blender, because you don't just shove everybody in, turn it on, and like, oh yeah, okay, we're this family now. It's like long, slow process of every individual still keeping who they are and what's made them, and coming together to create something new. So yes, the journey continues.
That's awesome. And you just think of all the lessons they're learning as children that it's going to help them in their lives.
They have had to be really resilient and to grow in that. And in some ways, loss and death and trauma absolutely creates challenges and wounds. I don't appreciate it when some people will say it only like makes you stronger, and it always is for that, like wound. Like there are some very real things about that make you weaker in areas, and we have triggers and things to navigate that we wouldn't have otherwise had to have if we didn't have some of these painful suffering and things in our life. And it's also true that, like post-traumatic growth is a real thing. That's a very important part of the work I do with coaching and the Christian widow community as well, because I like to say in grief, we really need to hold these two different things well, to widow well, to navigate grief well. And on the one hand, you have to be real and authentic and raw and about the struggle. We need to be able to be safe grief companions for one another, where we can be really honest about those things and find a safe place to be seen and to share our stories, because there's so much healing when we can share our stories in safe places and in safe relationships. So that's an important part of it, is coming alongside in the struggle and being honest about that and not pushing it away and not giving all the platitudes and the religious platitudes and trying to jump over grief like you can skip it or numb it out, because inevitably, like, you're living your life and reacting from those wounds. You just haven't paused to like look at what they are and bring healing to them. And so that's so valuable. But I have also found if you only have that in grief spaces, people can almost circle the drain of hopelessness, where they hold on to their grief with like white knuckled grip. And they say things like, I died when he died. It will never be good again. There may be hope for you or for other people, but not for me. There's no coming back from this. This will never, and those are not objectively true statements. I mean, even the things that really resonate with our humanness that seem like I've connected with other grievers, like children should not die before their parents and things like that. Like, those sentiments are valid pain, but when we hold on to them like they're objective truth when they're not, and we get defensive about our grief and we're angry in it, and it's only a space to like say how horrible and awful and the loss is all the time, and that's all we ever do, we are stuck there. And there's a lot of grief spaces like that. And so you both have to be able to be real honest about the struggle and the stumbles and the falling down, and it's not all going to look perfect. But if you have a safe space on that one hand for that, and on the other hand, it's very important to have hope, to have growth, to have forward movement in grief. Like, we're still grieving, but we haven't died when they died, and that our story isn't over yet, and that today's reality isn't our forever reality, and it doesn't have to be. And that these thoughts that we're believing, these thoughts that become beliefs that we really live out of, they create what we feel, how we experience grief, and they create the actions that we take out of that, which is like ultimately our result, right? The life we're living in, we are creating it. And so our thoughts and our beliefs are so important in that, and so important in the work of coaching I do, to be able to hold out hope that there is so much purpose that can come from the pain, and there's so much life still to live, and to be open to the possibilities that are still ahead. It's just so vital to have a space with both. And so I'm really about both of those things, to be honest and safe and real, and to have hope in the process, and to grieve with hope, to heal deeply, to have eyes and a heart that desires to rebuild again, because it can be good again. It's not ever going to be the same good, but it can be good again. And it won't be if we don't believe that and we aren't willing to take action and be intentional about our healing to get there and to create that. So I help people do that.
That's amazing. And I agree with you. I think it's, I'm also an attempt survivor, and I lost a really good friend. And in 2020, I started this because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's true that sometimes our hardest things that we deal with become our purpose. And I've seen that over and over and over and over since I've been doing this. It's like, it seems like everybody that has been on this podcast has been through something really hard, and a lot of them have made it their life's mission because of what they went through. And I think I see that in what you're doing as well. And I think it's easy to say, yeah, that was hard, and I put it behind me, or that I'm still grieving, or I'm still not okay. It's okay to say that, but like what you're saying, then what do you do with it?
Mm-hmm. And that's where I really found a lot of traction in coaching, which is why I became one. I did weekly therapy for years and years and years, and like 5 years. And I did all the things. I'm very into personal development and growth. And I took things from all of those things. Counseling and therapies were wonderful in their own way, and grief groups and support groups and the podcasts and the books and all of the things, and retreat and conferences, and they're good in their own way. But a lot of it, particularly with therapy and counseling and stuff, and again, it has its complete valid place and necessary place when I do consultations with people. If they're not ready for the whole coaching thing, like I refer them out toward counseling in those really acute places of struggle, because counseling is a lot of looking back and looking at the loss now and asking like why, and working through those things, whereas coaching is like forward focused, like what now, like I don't want to stay here, so how do I move forward and rebuild something different than what my current daily life looks and feels like in my future? And found a lot of traction with that, having done so much of that work, being able to look forward and create something different. Like it's what I've done. And I've been there from that complete hopelessness to this beautiful life I'm privileged to have. And I've done it. So we're able to help other people do so as well.
I think the other question I would like to ask you is, one thing we struggle a lot with in this community is when someone loses someone to suicide that's close to them. What advice would you give them?
Being a suicide prevention advocate myself, the most important thing my mind goes to is that I want people to be aware that if you have lost someone close to you by suicide, you are at higher risk yourself. And in addition to that, widows are actually at higher risk of suicide in their early widowhood in the first month and year. And so suicide widows, have a double whammy on that as well. But what I would say is to really make sure that you are getting the support you need in your grief. In suicide grief, when we're asking all of these questions like, what could I have done different? What if my last interaction with them had been different? What if I had called? What if I had said this? What if, all of the things and the whys, and struggling with the guilt that we feel, and struggling with the darkness, because I believe what I felt for myself is when my husband went through that door, it was like he opened the door and left it cracked. That hadn't been opened in that same way before. Like something that should never be a possibility has become a real solution to somebody. And so the people left around them can feel that that is a possibility and a solution for them. Like, it doesn't seem so far out there when you just have lost someone so near and dear to you the same way. And so people who have lost someone need to truly see that they are worth every resource, time, money, effort, like all of it, to stay alive and to heal and to keep going. Because that place where suicide happens in our brains, and where that goes from something we would never imagine doing to something that becomes a possibility, to a solution, to our only way out, like where that happens, we're in a very extreme place where we're not in our right mind. And we are along the line of thought where we're like, oh, I couldn't, what other, I would ask this question, what other, if you're in a place where you start to struggle yourself with suicidal thoughts, what other extreme changes could be made in your life? Because passing the same way is the most extreme thing that could ever happen. Like, we keep ourselves from getting the help we need. We're like, I would never go inpatient because I'd lose some days of work, or what would people think of me? Or I can't take time off of work because I have to make the bills, and I couldn't take this trip with my family. Like, I couldn't rethink my whole life. I couldn't afford a coach. I couldn't afford, and it's like, oh, you couldn't do all those things, but do you understand, if you die, you lose all of them. Like, there went all of the job and all of the money and you being there for your family and all of the things. Like, we need to be willing to consider options and resources and help that we think are too extreme, and really realize that we're worth every resource before we would get to the point of making that permanent decision, because it won't always be the way it is right now. And we can have help so we can make it to that next season and be alive to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be my thought, going the route of suicide prevention in the people down the line, because people's families and things are at more risk. Like, my husband did not realize where I was going to be within a year, within a couple of years, where one of our children has been inpatient for suicidal ideation. Like, I mean, if you really thought about what you were opening up for people behind you and what the real results were going to be, we may be willing to reconsider.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said. I think it's, the person that died by suicide that made me start this was not somebody that I was married to or family with. It was just a friend that I had known for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he was struggling, but I never got the chance to talk to him. And so the question in my mind that started all of this was, if I could have talked to him, would it have mattered? And I think that is what keeps me doing what I'm doing. But I also think it is the question that could also give the answer to this, because most people, from what I've learned and know, most people who die by suicide feel like either nobody cares or understands, or they feel like they can't speak up or ask for help. And I think if we could make this conversation normal, that it would save lives.
Mm-hmm.
It would give people that permission to say, hey, I need help. Hey, I need to talk about this. But we've made it such a stigma for so long that there are people, especially men, who don't feel like they can say that, or they can't ask somebody for help in that situation.
Yeah, where they haven't been allowed to be human because they're supposed to be emotionless and strong. Yeah, there's so many factors. And in part of the work I do in suicide prevention and speaking, and it's so valid and true that there's so many things that we can do from the outside to help people. Like, we know we can prevent suicides by being resources to other people, right? But what I'm passionate about is taking it kind of from another angle, that I want people to understand they can prevent their own suicide, and that they have that space where that happens in our brain. Like I mentioned, where suicide goes from something unimaginable to something you think about, to something that's a possibility, to a solution, to like your only way out, like to really understand how dangerous that place is in our own mind and in our own brain and in our own thoughts. Because especially for people who have struggled, we can often return to that. And it's almost like a place of comfort, like somewhere we're like, oh, it's getting really hard. Whatever the thoughts are, it would be better if this was done. My suffering could be over. Like in my case, I'm supposed to be here for these kids and I'm not doing this well. Like I'm just hurting them. They'd be better off without me. Whatever all of the lies and all of the things are, when we spend time there, we're digging a very steep slope. We're digging this trench deeper and steeper and lubricating it up. And in my opinion, doing that alongside the enemy who comes to kill and steal and destroy and accuse. And the more time we spend in that space, then when you are in a place feeling so low and so triggered and in an active place of acting on it, which research has shown is relatively short to be in that real, like I'm attempt mode, hours to a day, usually not even often multiple days in a row. I mean, we can struggle with suicide for ongoing, but when you are like acting, when you come to that place and are triggered, you jump into that box that you and the devil have already spent a lot of time digging and lubricating, and slide right down when you are not even in your right mind. So helping people to take their thoughts captive and really wage war on that. I mean, I had personally, after my attempts, I had to like rebuke it. Like when those thoughts would come and stuff, I mean, like very strong, like Satan or this, or talking to myself, Rachel, like I would rebuke the Satan with curse words in my mind. And I'm not generally a foul-tongued person, but I like war, like a soldier, war to protect that space in my mind, because I could prevent my own suicide by refusing to go there, to consider it, to soothe myself, to think of it as an option, to think of it as a plans, to bring other people who are safe into that struggle. But I personally think that that's a really important part of the discussion that I hope to speak and even write on more, that black box of suicide, I like to call it, that place that happens. It's so important for us to understand that it's a dangerous place, and we have a lot of power and control in that process to protect our own lives.
Yeah, that's true. And the only other thing I would add to what we're talking about is when addiction is involved, that's a little different, because I know that you experienced that with your husband, but the night of my attempt, my blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. So it makes me wonder, like, if I would not have had the alcohol in my system, would I have made the same decision? And that's another thing that we need to address sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. The cycle with addiction and how that can really destroy a lot of life and bring people to hopelessness, let alone what you're talking about, which is not being sober when you are thinking of attempting, and the risk that whole process that we just talked about can happen of you entering that space and making these decisions when you're under the influence of something is, yeah, it's also extremely dangerous and an important part of the discussion.
Yeah, I also think that I've had conversations with many people about the fact that when somebody is at that point, they're not necessarily thinking about the people they're going to hurt. They're thinking about their own pain and how to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's,
Yes.
it's not many people have said to me that suicide is selfish, and
Mm-hmm.
I always have a conversation with them about it because of what I just said. It's like people are in so much pain and they don't see another way out. And it's not that they're not even thinking about you or their family or the people that are going to be grieving them. They're thinking about, how do I make this stop?
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Totally agree. And hopefully that, as we speak about that, I do the same. Like, it has nothing to do with the value or worth of other people. Although as loss survivors, we struggle with that, right? Like, I wasn't enough for them to stay, or did they love me? Or I'll have people say to me, how could he have done that with this beautiful family? And I'm like, well, how could I have done that with these 4 kids that were left with, because it wasn't about them. It
Mhm.
wasn't if they were worthy enough or not, or that I was actually having rational thoughts about those things. It's like, on 9/11 or another tragic time where people were on fire and jumped from the building, from a
Yeah.
burning building, all of these stories up to their own death, right? Nobody woke up that morning and could even conceive of something in their mind. Like, and in life, you can get to a place with suicide, it feels like you're burning alive. Like, when you are in so much pain that you are like, I cannot do this any longer.
Mhm.
And you jump to do an awful, scary, horrible thing when you're not in your right mind to your own end. Like, it's because you're in so much pain. Like, nobody jumped thinking, oh, I'm being like, they were selfish, not thinking about whoever was, like they were burning alive. And if you haven't been there, it's hard to understand what that is like, to feel like you are in impossible and unbearable pain
Mhm.
and can't do it anymore. And instead think, how could I be there for someone in that place, rather than a judgment of where they're struggling or what they did if they passed that way. Because I grieve for his pain, and I grieve for our pain. And
Mhm.
when we put judgment and call it selfish, we're still not able to tap into other people's pain.
Yeah. I'm glad we had this conversation, because it's so important, because so many people that have lost someone close to them don't understand. And I can't even imagine um, some of the situations that people have been through and how they can, deal with that. But like I said, I still think conversations can help, because if we can talk about it, or you can write in a journal about it, or
Mm-hmm.
you can tell your story in some way, it helps, because then you kind of get it out of your head and have other people that understand or support you.
Yes, and there is so much help and hope and support for people who are struggling, and for those who've been affected by it. Often many of us are passionate about suicide prevention, having lost someone, and so we can support the work that they're doing. I forgot to mention, for me in my business, like I focus a lot with Christian widows with the coaching and the coaching community, but I do speaking for suicide prevention, and am an advocate in different ways and through my writing. And one special thing, if anyone hears this and wants to support the suicide prevention and advocacy and Christian widow support that I do, one of the beautiful things that came from the ashes is that my oldest and I, in the aftermath, we hand designed tangible reminders of hope. And a lot of them are suicide prevention related messages, but they could be mugs or t-shirts or hats or stickers or things that remind you, like, your story isn't over yet, that life is worth living, that you're not alone, that the struggle isn't in vain. And to have these tangible reminders, because I needed them when when I was so low and struggling all the time, those thoughts are like constant. And I needed to have things, whether they were handwritten on sticky notes or whatnot. Now we just have them in things that we have designed with our own hands, beautiful things, whether they're gifts for other people or for messages for yourself, wall art, to put up with these reminders that are fighting those constant dark lies, and to have tangible reminders of hope that you can gift or wear or hang as reminders. And if people are interested in checking out our family hope shop, they can find it at hopespeaker.shop. My main website is hopespeaker.com, but you can find the hope shop at hopespeaker.shop.
Awesome. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. I think that, we have a lot of conversations on this podcast about mental health and about suicide, but I don't think we've ever had a conversation exactly like this one, and I think it's really important.
I'm grateful to have been on and to share it with people, and I hope that they know and are reminded that, again, today's reality isn't your forever reality. The season that you are in right now is not the end, and that we can't even see all of the things that are ahead in purpose for us and for the people that we will be used to come alongside through what we have been through, that our stories are not tragedies, and that under the rubble of all of it, there is still a deeper foundation of hope. And I believe it with all my heart.
I do too. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Thanks again.